Hello everyone, welcome to Bootcamp. Today we are going to cover the remaining portion of the Shopify with the GraphQL. Previously we have covered the Shopify with the Buy SDK. Today we are going to cover with the GraphQL and we'll see what we need to do for the GraphQL. So you want to add in something?
No, nothing. Let's just complete it as soon as possible.
Okay. Okay, so let me share my screen first. Okay, so the link, Sazia has, we are working with the Jamstack e-commerce. It has multiple links. One of the link which is important for the GraphQL, there are few which you can explore: Shopify GraphQL Learning Resource, GraphQL Learning Kit. There are many such links that cover the how GraphQL will be integrated with the Shopify, how you will be working with them. All these links explains you how you will be calling the GraphQL library and what are the features or how you can access everything. So learning resources available also, so you can see GraphQL, admin API, storefront API, all these available. These links are available. There is a learning kit. It also provides how you can access. So what you need to understand is the code we have implemented in last class was related to the creating a checkout, adding a product into the line item in a checkout, and then making a checkout with Buy SDK. So Shopify also created the GraphQL API for the same things. So you can do the create a checkout, add a product to the line item, update it, you can go to the checkout. All these things can be done with GraphQL. Also, Shopify created the GraphQL API for admin, so that if you want to build your admin where you need to fetch the orders, how many orders are there, how many customers are there, and you can run anything and create your own admin UI. So that's also so GraphQL provides you Shopify provides you two GraphQL API, one for the admin and one for the storefront. Storefront means the web store, and to connect your Shopify server with your front end. And another link is which is also available here, getting started with GraphQL. If it's not there, that's the main link. You will see getting started with Shopify Storefront API. It covers in a sequence, but we'll see what the important parts are there into it. So first thing first, as we have seen with the Buy SDK, that we need SDK token or Storefront API token. So that's the same token we have discussed last time, but in this case, we'll be calling with the GraphQL. So we need to set this header in our GraphQL call so that all our call can be accessed using this token. Creation of private app we have covered in our first class related to the Shopify, how we will be creating the private apps and how we'll be creating the settings, and then we'll be updating the storefront API. All this has already been covered. So this all these things are already covered, and these are similar in case of either you are using with the Buy SDK or with GraphQL. There will be same. There will be no difference. GraphQL also provide you the GraphQL interface, which you can download and install. But at this moment, we do not. It's not necessary for us. But you can. What you can do is
Zeeshan, could you repeat that again? I didn't understand it. What does it provide?
It's a GraphQL. It's a desktop application with which you can connect your this interface with your Shopify server. So with this, let me just show you once. Using the GraphQL, it just provide the download link. Let me first show that. That's the download link for this GraphQL app. What this GraphQL app, it's a desktop application built with the web electron. And what you can do is you can download it and then configure, edit headers, add your headers into it. And then what you can do is you can access the, I have already installed it. So what you can do is edit header, add your Shopify store header and accept JSON. Once you're done adding these two headers, it will give you the access to Shopify store and you can access all the information.
Zeeshan, could you repeat that again? What two headers you have to add?
Just a moment. First of all, you need to go to this link on this GitHub page. It gives you the releases. In releases, you will go and download, either if you are using, as I'm using Windows, so I have downloaded GraphQL exe setup. Download and install. Once you installed it, then what you need to do is, it's in a desktop application, it's on your machine, and you need to connect it with Shopify. So it needs URL to connect to the Shopify, and it needs an access token so that it can access your private data, your products and your customer and everything. So once installed, it has this edit HTTP header. Go to this edit HTTP header, click add header, and inside that header, you need to provide, I have already added, so that's not a problem, X Shopify storefront access token. That's a key header name. And the value will be your Shopify store token, which we have seen on our previous two classes. Another option, another header, name accept, and value should be accept JSON. So once you add these both, you can now connect to your Shopify store in this GraphQL interface. So all these details are already been given here. If you the URL, as you can see, shanstore2.myshopify.com API. I cannot zoom it, it's in a desktop application. API / 2019-7 GraphQL. So that's the URL which Shopify has provided you. So it's mentioning that how you can provide this URL. Once you provide this URL, now you can access, let's say it's saying we want to access your shop detail. So I'll copy just this query.
It's a kind of GraphQL Explorer.
Yeah, it's a GraphQL Explorer, but the important part is that you do not need to run your application to explore your API. You do not need to run an application. Otherwise, we need to run Netlify dev and then we can explore API and do something. In this case, you do not have to worry about those things. Just explore your API. You can call the mutation and everything from here. Okay, so that's one thing. At this moment, we do not need it. So I'm closing it. Okay, so that's the one part. If you want to explore and run your query without starting your application server, they are providing few queries so that you can see how you can access it. Important part is for us is example workflow. Here they provide you few links, and the most important links are these four and these two: checkout, create, and web URL. You can go from this URL or you can explore from here, getting started. So once you set up everything, shops, products, which we have already done in our previous class, what you need to do is you need to call GraphQL query to create a checkout, GraphQL query to add line item, to update line item, to remove line item, or anything. So it has provided you this link, and you can explore this from here as well. Just I'm showing you the this storefront API getting started reference. So everything is available here in reference. Just creating another page. It gives you all the object that GraphQL Shopify created for the to access with GraphQL. So in case of checkout, you have these objects: applied gift, ship, checkout line item, checkout credit card payment. If I click the checkout, it will show what properties, what the filters you can apply after, before. I'll show you the filters, and what are the fields available in this object. So whenever you are fetching the data from the server using the GraphQL, you need to specify fields, what fields you need. And we have in detail saw in our previous class that when you create a checkout, it has many properties like ID, email, order, line items, shipping, text. These are all properties. We have web URL. We have all seen these properties in our by SDK. So Shopify created the object for what you say GraphQL. This is the object which you can access when you create a checkout. Same goes for the checkout line item. I'll show you. I'm just showing you the documentation, and then I'll show you how you can access them. This is the checkout line item. As we have seen in our by SDK, we have to add a line item into our checkout. So that's the ID, quantity, title. These are the objects available for GraphQL for the Shopify. These are the checkout object, and these are the mutations which we actually need to work on. So just same, I'll show you in a moment the product. So you have objects for the product, and you have objects for the orders, you have object for the discount, you have objects for the customer, and they show you what you can access from the customer object. Let's go back to the checkout. What you need to understand is from the client will call create checkout. So for that they have created given us mutations. So that's the mutation, and the good part is this this documentation is very important for us. This documentation shows you how this mutation will be accessed, or what this mutation is. Let's say mutation, create checkout, dollar input, checkout, create checkout, input, checkout ID. And good part is it's an interactive. So what you can see, let's say I'll be creating the create checkout as a very first item, so that it creates a checkout and then I can add line item. So I can see from here that it has two objects, checkout and checkout user errors. So they have already shown both of in checkout. I can see control space, and it will show you the all the properties you can access. So let's say I want to access email and web URL. I want to access line item. Line item is an object. So it's all available very easy in easy and interactive way. So you just have to enter the control space, and it will show you list of properties which you can access. So in this way you have created a mutation, and now you can use this mutation for inside your code. So all these mutations are interactive. It also mentions what variables you need to input. And let's say let me show one more checkout line item that we will be adding the line item. So there is another mutation. It will all clear once I'll add all these things into the code. I'll just showing you the documentation because that's very important. These all things are very difficult to connect how you will be accessing all these things. So that's very important that you need to understand the documentation. So mutation, checkout line item, input, it's a checkout line item and checkout ID, and that's the checkout line item. So it means it's require an object as a line item and checkout ID, and it returns the checkout and the checkout user error. If there is an error, then it will be error. If there is no error, then it will return the checkout session. And to call this mutation, you need to provide what? As it says, it requires line item and checkout ID. So we can provide line item like this line item array, and inside this an object quantity and variant ID. It's exactly similar what we have done with the buy SDK. We have created the checkout, and then we were adding the line item inside the checkout. So, and with the checkout ID. So that's exactly similar to what we have seen in buy SDK, but only this time we'll be doing with the GraphQL. So we have checkout line item, remove, update. So all these line items can be used to mutation can be used to create the checkouts and everything. Okay, so that's the important part of the documentation that we need. The very first thing we need is a mutation to contact. So these are the mutation, and they have provided very interactive, so it's easy for you. Okay, another thing. Yes, the problem is there is no single article or I am unable to find which shows create this Apollo client and then call this and then call this. For that, they themselves given us a few examples, which is available in Storefront API examples. So for us in this case, we need to explore React Hook Apollo. This example is the best match for what we need to do is connecting with the Shopify GraphQL with the Apollo and then call the mutations. So I have it already open over here. We'll see if we'll require, but it's just creating the Apollo client and then adding the provider, and then it's called creating the mutation and everything. So I'll show you in a moment. Okay. So now what we need to do is, in our previous class, we have implemented an example and then we have added buy SDK into it. So what I did is I just use the same example so that it saves our time. If you want to explore it again, you can see our first class of Shopify where we have created what you say, Gatsby source Shopify. We have connected how we connected the Gatsby source Shopify, how we provided the shop name, access token. That's all we have already done in our first class of Shopify. So I just pick those things, and the how we'll show the products. That's the code which we have done in our first Shopify class. So I just picked that, except for the buy SDK. There is no buy SDK code because we are going to cover with the GraphQL. So let me show this. Netlify dev. If there is anything already running. Okay, so what you need to do as a first step, you will create your shop, then you will add product into it. Then what we have seen in our first class, we have accessed the GraphQL Shopify's products using the Shopify source Gatsby source Shopify plugin. Provided the shop name and access token, which we have already seen in our previous two classes, and then access all the products. So I have just
Zeeshan,
the same code. Yes,
you are going to use the same code with example number 2. You are going to name it example number 2 or what?
I'm going to name it using Gatsby, and I'll change the previous one to the using buy SDK.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's need to be clear. Needs to be understood very clearly that the portion we have covered to fetch the product is exactly the same. So I have not changed that. So I just fetch the product using the source Shopify plugin, and we have the products. Now from there onwards, we need to add the Apollo client and the mutation so that we can connect with the to the Shopify with GraphQL. Okay, so that's done. And now what we need to do is we need to add the uh, for the Apollo. If you have not if you need to learn how you can call the Apollo, so you can see Jamstack examples or Jamstack examples on GitHub. There's all they have the Apollo access. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add Apollo, and I'll be adding the line.js. And okay, so what we need to understand is in our case, we need to wrap all our element into the provider, the context API. So all element, everything should be inside the context API of Apollo provider. So for that, we have learned in our previous classes that we can create a global element which can cover all our pages. So all our pages will be wrapped around it. So for that, that's also we have learned these things already been learned in previous classes. So that's also not a problem. Okay, so now what we need, I need to install the npm install Apollo client because we need to connect with the GraphQL. So it's installing Apollo client. Meanwhile, okay, so now what export const client equals to Apollo client, and inside that we need to provide link that's already been covered in our GraphQL classes. New HTTP link and cache. Here we'll provide URI and fetch. Okay, so for the fetch we need to install the cross fetch. Okay, so what URL we need to provide it? We need to provide the, as we have seen in our previous examples, in which we will be connecting, we were what we were doing. Yes, we were connecting with the Lambda function. So our server was the Lambda function, and we were connecting with that. So we need to provide URL over here. That URL can be accessed from here. This link web URL it also provides, and they also provide over here. As you can see, so shop name will be my shop name. And it will not check this. Okay. So another thing which we need is headers. So for that we need to provide headers here inside the HTTP. and token will be my GraphQL token, storefront API token. So that's how you will be creating the Apollo client. You can always refer back to the Apollo hook application, but the problem is they have done it. There's in 2-3 steps which does not require. So I have skipped these things and I have done this directly with the HTTP link. It can be done with the HTTP link directly, but you have these examples or a more multiple things are available in this example, which GraphQL Shopify itself provided you, because there is no direct link which gives you the Apollo client's implementation and everything. Okay, once we created this Apollo client, and then we'll wrap it inside the element. Apollo provider. And now here we need to provide client, which is available in this file. We have exported it. So then, as we have seen that you need to provide Gatsby browser and Gatsby SSR. This rep root element will be provided in the Gatsby browser and SSR, so that all the pages at this moment we have index page. If we have more pages, all these pages are wrapped inside the Apollo provider. So for that I'll create Gatsby dash browser.js. And then export. Root element. In SSR and browser both. So because of this, we will have this client or this element around all the elements of this page. Now we have this available here, and what we can do is, let me run this again so we are sure that it's working fine. There is an error. Fetch. Fetch. Okay, I need to import fetch. I have installed the cross fetch. Yes. I need to import.
Zeeshan, can you tell the students what does cross fetch do?
Basically, it's similar to the fetch, but whenever you need to call the cross, you need to call the APIs, cross domain APIs, because that at this moment I'll be running this application from my client, which is a local host, and I need to send a request to a different domain. So when you need to do a request to a different domain, cross domain fetching, when you need to do, then you will be using the cross fetch, so that you do not have to worry about the cross domain calls. Otherwise you will be if I'll try to use the normal fetch, it will not give me access to the Shopify store. Why? Because I'm running on a local host, my domain is different, and the GraphQL URL which is running on a different domain. That's why we need to use a cross domain calling. And for the cross domain calling, what you can do is you can use the fetch with from the cross fetch library. This will help you to call the API which is on different domain.
Because there was another purpose of cross fetch, because in Node.js fetch was not there.
Yes.
So therefore, once you have to run cross fetch, the another benefit of cross fetch is that you can run it because Gatsby build is being done at build time is being done at Node.js with Node.js.
Yes. Yes.
That
Yes,
is another
because
reason. So using for cross fetch.
agree. Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. So once we are done with this, I just forgot one more thing here. Import, because this is a React code, so we need to import React as well, which I forgot to add. Okay. Okay. So it's running. Another error. In-memory cache is not defined. In-memory cache. In-memory cache. Okay. Again. Apollo. Set default. Apollo client HTTP link in memory cache. Maybe I'm missing something. Apollo client. Client. Client JS line number 4. New. Okay, so it's started finally. The problem was just I forgot to use the new keyword. Okay, so now we know that it's working and we have the Apollo client configured. We will talk to our Shopify using the GraphQL, and all our pages has this GraphQL access. Now what we need to do is, first of all, as we have seen in our Buy SDK, that first of all we need to create a checkout session. Once we have that checkout session, everything we are going to add in the checkout will be using add line item function, as we have seen in Buy SDK. So it's similar in this case, but with the mutations. So what we need to do first of all is, let's go to the documentation again, as we have seen here in create checkout, and we can see that that's the mutation we need. But what I want is web URL, and if I want line items or not, let me add the line items. For that line item, edges, node, entity, ID, title, then variant, so that's the variant ID, and we have, so all as much as information you need to access, you can use this, and that will be our checkout session object, which will return to us. It will create a checkout on the GraphQL, and it will return us this information. Now you can see the benefit in case of our Buy SDK. It was returning a full object, checkout object. It has multiple things and many things which we do not require. The things we do not require, but they were coming to our client, and it was causing the network bandwidth. That's why GraphQL is beneficial, that you will be calling only data that is required. So what we are saying, that create a mutation, checkout
Therefore,
create.
you are saying basically, if you want to speed up Shopify apps,
Yes,
the best way to do it is use GraphQL.
GraphQL, because we have seen in our case of Buy SDK that every time we add a line item, we update a line item, we receive a complete checkout object which has multiple items, and we were not required all shipping and everything. We don't require everything, so that's why in this case it's beneficial for us. So it says create a mutation, add an input, and at the input it says you do not need to pass anything, just a blank input property. Now what I'll do is I'll copy this mutation, and as we have learned that first we need to create a GraphQL. We can create in a separate page as well, but at this moment I'm uh, using here const checkout create checkout. What's this name? Checkout create checkout create checkout equals GQL, as we have seen, and then we'll provide this inside. So we have added the mutation over here. Now we need to use the use mutation hook to call this mutation. So what I'll do is here in home, the const equals use mutation, and will provide create checkout, and it will return us a function which we can call for the mutation. So I'll name it create checkout mutation, and it also returns us a data, so we can restructure data. So it returns data, loading, and error. At this moment I don't need both of them, so I'm not using them. So that's what we have. And then now as soon as page loads, we need to create checkout session. So I'll use effect, as we have already done in case of Buy SDK. So it's a connected, so that's why I'm referring every time, so that you can connect whenever you are working either GraphQL or Buy SDK. use effect. And here what we need is const response get checkout mutation. I need async function. Because I'm using await, so I need an async function. Okay. Now we need to provide some input inside it, and this documentation also says variables. So as we have learned while learning the GraphQL, that every mutation requires an object named variable. So here variables. So this documentation says inside the variable. So this after this colon, you need to provide object like this. So we can copy from here easily and either keep it in double quote or without double quote. It's just an object. So that's how you need to call it, and then it will return at session. It will create a checkout session on the Shopify. It will return you inside the response. Also, it will return it in this data variable. So let's check the code so that there is an error. Okay. Data is already identified. Okay. So the problem is this variable already named data, and we have created another variable named data. So we can rename it. Let's say when we destructure it, we can rename the variable. So let me call it checkout data. So we can access it with this name, checkout data. It also has use mutation is not defined. Use mutation. Let's go back to the example. Okay, as it's load, you must provide first of. Okay, so the error it's showing, which I was discussing when I was showing you the checkout object, and I said these are the filters and these are the fields which can access from the object. So you have this filter. So whenever you are accessing the line items, you need to provide the filter, and this filter you can go to the create checkout example where we have created. Okay, yes, here, and I can call it first. So it requires you to provide either how many items you need to access. So let's say if I say 30 or 100, it will fetch only first 100 line items. So that's what I need to provide over here. So these are the filters for our array in GraphQL. Okay, so console, and here you can see this code which try to fetch the create the checkout session and return the response. So here we have the response object inside this data property, inside this checkout create, and we have a complete checkout object with the ID, line item, web URL, and only items that requires to us. So that's our checkout session has been created. Now what we need to do is we need to add a product in the line item into the cart. So for that we need to go and see how we can create a mutation for checkout line item. So they provide this interactive again, and we can again customize all these properties for the checkout, which I'll just copy from here at this moment. So let me just copy it as it is. You can use GraphQL fragment. So I'm not going into the GraphQL fragment at this moment. So just copy this mutation, create another mutation, const add line item. So the good part is they have given us the mutations and the interactive portion so that we can easily. Now for this checkout portion, what I'll do is I'll copy everything here. So I need checkout object exactly like this. You can use GraphQL fragment for this, but I'm not going over there at this moment. So we have this checkout line item add mutation, which has a Shopify had created for us, and we are using it. Now I need to create another mutation for this. Const use mutation, add line item, and then add line item mutation. You can name it anything. I'm just connecting it with the name of mutation. It will return us data, which again will be a checkout session. As we have learned in BiasDK that every time you create a checkout, it returns you a session object. You add an item, it returns you session object. You update an item, return you session object. Exactly similar to this. Whenever we add a line item, the data we receive is a checkout session. Add line item data, and we need to call it once whenever we click the add to cart button. So for that, as we have seen, this is our product, and here we have the add to cart button. In this add to cart button, what I'll do is here I need to call this add line item mutation, and I need to pass checkout ID and line item. They also provided you how you can do this. You need to provide an object inside the variable, and that object should contain line item and the checkout ID. So line items array and the checkout ID. So for that, call variables, and inside the variable object, I need line items, array of line items, so that we can add multiple. And this array require an object. Each index require an object, and for that, one property is quantity, another one is variant ID. So that as we have done again in our BiasDK. So let me just, after the line item, we need checkout ID. Okay, now how we are going to access the checkout ID and the variant ID. So we have the variant ID is available here as we iterating on the products, and we have the node title description node dot variant. So variant has an id available to us, so I'll just call this node dot variant 0 dot id. And as we have done in the BuySDK case, it provides you the Shopify double underscore product double underscore then ID. So we need to call the split as well here. Okay, for the checkout ID, it requires the ID of a checkout session, which is available here, checkout data. Or what you can do is you can add the product in this in state as well. At this moment, I'm using it directly. So, but we need to see where, because that's an object, so where this property will be available to us. To this, just a moment. So the data available inside data property, data is already checked. Create checkout, and then we have the ID. So what we need to do is, that's already the data. So we have this data, then we need to call the create checkout create, then checkout, which is this one, then ID. So that's how we can access ID of our checkout session. And we'll call it using the await. So we'll have this response. We'll see what does the response returns to us. Okay. So initially there is no line item. Line item is empty. Now I'll add this, add to cart. And there is an error, was provided invalid value, invalid global ID, variance.id.split. Oh, and this, we need to access the second. Okay, add to cart. Okay, so it's added to the card and response after adding. We have data, checkout. You can see the difference in name, checkout line item add, just the naming of a query line item, and we have one object inside it. That's the variant, and it has a price in all quantity. So we have created this session, and then we have added a line item inside the session. So the important thing which you need to understand is they have given you all the details. You can create a mutation. What you need to understand, when you call the mutation, it returns you something, and they provided you what they returns. So you can access the checkout object and the error object if there is an error. So if there is an error, it will be available inside this property. Otherwise, you will receive a checkout object, and you can customize how many properties or whatever properties you want from this mutation. So update line item, remove line item, all these properties are available. As uh, I'm not going over there, I'll show you the checkout directly. But same is for the update line item. You do not have to worry about anything. Just copy this mutation, and they require the checkout ID and line item. As we have seen, we need to provide line item ID over here. So in this case, what we have done is we have created a query to create checkout. Then we have created query to add product into the line item. Now, you can easily go with this query and you can update the line item. But I'm going towards the checkout so that we can see how checkout can be done. And checkout, I'll be showing the traditional way of checkout in this case. Otherwise, they have provided you multiple other ways, which I'll explain you. Okay. Now, here what we can do is we have option of, as we have seen this link, this web URL on checkout object. It has a complete page and it gives us multiple details how you can call the mutation, and all the details are available. It's good to read this article. The important part is when you go to the checkout, what are the options available for the checkout. Yes. So you can use the web URL and open a checkout window, or you can use the Shopify card, Vault, Stripe, or Speedy. So in that case, you can use, let me show you. Stripe. So there is another mutation named checkout complete with tokenized payment S3. I'm not going to show the implementation, but you have this mutation and you can use this mutation to call the Stripe, then get the token from the Stripe, and then submit your token to the Shopify using this mutation. So you can connect. So in that way, you will be creating your customized page by yourself for the checkout, and then you'll be submitting all the details as we have done with custom UI in Stripe. So you have this, what is the name? Checkout complete. Checkout complete tokenize page. So they have provided you mutation. You can call this mutation and submit all the details the way they have explained, and you can do this. At this moment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the web URL to simplify the checkout process. Instead of creating our own checkout, we'll call the web URL, and for that, just as we have done previously, window.open, and it needs a web URL from checkout session. So we have checkout data available here. Data dot we need checkout create dot checkout dot web URL. Okay, so let me add this product and then this product. So we have added two products. Now click on the checkout. So it opens the checkout interface. Oh, it's taking time. Can you hear me?
Yes, Zeeshan, you are there.
Okay. So there was a network glitch. So once you click the checkout button, it will show you this checkout page, and you can fill information as we have done in our case of buy SDK. All these things will be similar. So that's the complete process. The important part is how you going to access the GraphQL. So that for that you need to understand, we need to call Apollo the particular way, and then we need to wrap all our pages around this inside this Apollo provider, and then we need to use mutations, which is very well documented inside the Shopify documentation. You just use those mutations and do whatever work you want to do with these mutations. For that you need to call use mutation, and then you will be calling mutation and providing the data. And that's uh, what you need to understand is we have kind of a scratch the surface of this uh, API. So there are a lot more things to do. We have just see how it can be done, and then there is a sky's the limit for this.
Zeeshan, can you tell us your GitHub repository where all the code will be available?
It will be the same. We have this gem stack e-commerce. Inside this project 4, there will be another folder name. It will be the name of using GraphQL. So that
Okay.
it will be inside this folder. So I'll be adding another folder in here.
Okay. Thank you so very much. Next week we are just going to finish off e-commerce. All the e-commerce code we have done so far is available in that repository in a few hours, and only one session is left of e-commerce, and after that we are finished with it, and we are going to move into serverless SaaS applications. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you, Zeeshan. And
Okay.
you want to add something?
No, I'm just done.
Okay. So see all of you on Saturday. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.